What's up, guys? I'm Zach Nava of Nava Reptiles, and welcome back to the channel. So for those of you that have kind of followed this channel along already, you guys know I talk a lot about ball pythons, and a lot of that is just because that's kind of what I've got going on currently in terms of like my breeding stuff and just a lot of excitement around that. But what you may not know, at least not all of you, is that I actually keep another species that actually to me is honestly a lot more exciting because they're not nearly as common. And there's still a lot more to be done with them. So what those are, judging by the title, I'm sure you already know, are dwarf and super dwarf reticulated pythons. So I have loved reticulated pythons for as long as I can remember, and it was always one of those in my head. It was an unattainable species. It was a species there's no way I could ever keep them. They just get too big. It's just not a reasonable thing. Maybe one day when I've got a big house and I've got a big room that I can set up just massive enclosures in, maybe. But then through some research, I found out about dwarf and super dwarfs. And a lot of that initial research was not great. It was, oh, they're not real. It's, they're underfed and this, that, and the other thing. It's all a myth. And that was before I stumbled upon Garrett from Reach Out Reptiles. And you guys know I've covered some of this stuff on the channel. Again, just if you've been following along. If not, I'll leave a link in one of these sides, to some of that previous content from Garrett's place. But from there on, I really opened my eyes to the reality of what dwarves and super dwarves could be, and that they are a real thing, and started learning about localities and things like that, and I just got super excited about it. And anyways, like I said, today I want to go ahead and show some of the stuff that I haven't really highlighted nearly enough, and I feel terrible for not shedding more light on these things that honestly I'm so excited about and so passionate about, because they're amazing animals that I think that yeah, they deserve to get a lot more credit than they do. And again, that's my fault for not highlighting them enough. I'm sure there's a lot of you guys yelling at the screen that you've been telling me this for a while. So anyways, today's that day. So let's dive into this. I'm going to kind of go from smallest to biggest right now. And yeah, let's take a look. All right, guys. So this first one that I wanted to show you is this beautiful little girl. I actually picked her up this year from Garrett at Reach Out Reptiles. And she is a 75% super dwarf. I'm being real gentle with her because you can probably see she's got a good lump in her belly. I just fed her last night, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. But she's a 75% super dwarf. She's consists of two localities. So she's 50% Kalatoa, and she's 25% Madu. And I think that the Madu is where she gets the head shape that she's got. Just a little bit more pointed than the other super dwarfs that I've got in my collection, and she's pretty fired up right now, so you can see just how light her head is. Now, she's not a normal. She is a Anery and Sunfire, and so that's where she gets this kind of crazy color and just a little bit more clean than what you would see on a normal super dwarf. She is just an absolute sweetheart, and again, I'm going to try to keep this real short with her, but I got her this year from Garrett, and I'll show you the next one I actually got at the same time. But she's just, like I said, she's just a joy to work with, and I'm really excited to grow her up. I don't exactly know her birth date right offhand. I have to check her card that I got from Garrett. Obviously, Garrett documents everything, and he provides a ton of really awesome information and clutch cards and things with his animals. And honestly, there's nobody else that I can think of off the top of my head that I would personally ever really consider, at least right now, buying another dwarf and super dwarf from. I mean, the way that he does business is just it's bar none, and the way that he cares for his animals and just the quality. To me, there's really nobody else out there that can touch him. But you see how just beautiful her head looks. I think she's kind of giving you guys a little checking out the camera a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I just love this girl. And again, it's just crazy to think that she's probably, I don't know, she's probably 8 months old or so right now. Again, I'd have to double check. So this is the next one, and I have to admit it's hard for me to play favorites, but this locality I think has quickly become my absolute favorite of all of the dwarf and super dwarf localities. So this is a Tombolongan, and this is a pure Tombolongan, and this is a male. Now, this animal does not actually belong to me. This is actually one of Garrett's holdback males that he was kind enough to send along with me down here to Charlotte back from when I picked up that girl from him and from his facility. He surprised me by sending me along with this male. Again, this male belongs to him, does not belong to me. But the plan, I think, your tentative plan is obviously for me to raise him up. You know, I'm feeding him. He's eating good. You can see he's got a big lump in his belly, just like that last girl. So I'm going to keep this real short. But just these colors that are coming through, and the Tom Belongans are they're part of this what they call Saputrii. They're very similar to the Solaire localities, which I'll show you a Solaire. I don't have a pure, but I do have a Solaire combo girl here, and they just get these crazy yellows that turn really kind of copper, and they're just so bright. None of the other localities can touch these in terms of what they do for the colors, and so I'm really excited to see what this Tom Belongan locality influence is going to bring when we start putting it into morphs. Like, can you imagine this thing with, like, you know, Sunfire, or especially like Platinum? I mean, I can't imagine. You know, these colors. So they get these, the blacks on these are just way darker, just really, really rich. And again, just, you know, these are, he's pretty fired up right now. And so he looks a lot more yellow. But again, as these guys age, that yellow kind of turns like orange and coppery. Just a beautiful locality. And I'm really, really excited to see, like I said, this guy grow up and what this influence is going to bring to some other projects. There's one tentative project that Garrett and I may end up working together on with this guy, but I'm not going to out that just yet. But it's some pretty exciting stuff, and yeah, I'm really excited to share that with you guys in the future as this boy grows up, and I'm going to start posting a lot more about these guys. Like I said, I don't really know, you know, have much of an excuse as to why I haven't been sharing these guys as much. Other than just that, like I said, I feel like I've had a lot going on with the ball pythons in terms of, like, this is my first year breeding and stuff like that. So I've just been really excited about those. But at the end of the day, I tell people all the time, in all seriousness, my passion for snakes really is is largely in these dwarves and super dwarves. I just don't think that there's a species that you can keep that gives as much back in terms of their interaction with us as what a reticulated python does. And so you get the best of both worlds in these guys, where, you know, they stay a little bit smaller, much more manageable sizes. You know, like even the largest, like the dwarf localities, you know, they're not going to outgrow like what a good sized boa would be. You know, so I feel like for most people they stay the sizes that most people can handle. The Tom Belongans are technically considered a dwarf. They are not considered a super dwarf, at least not in the U.S. It's my understanding that in Europe, the Tom Belongan locality is classified as a super dwarf. So, you know, there's some arguing to be done around that, but these guys do not get nearly as big as what, like, say, a Slayer or something like that would get. They're a good bit smaller. Still, just like I said, just an absolutely beautiful animal, and the size on these things is going to be super manageable for anybody that would want to keep them. So I'm going to get this guy put back just because, like I said, he did just eat yesterday. But let's move on to the next one. This next one's a little bit controversial, and I'll go over that as I'm holding him and kind of give you a little explanation of some things to look out for when you are buying super dwarfs and dwarves, and maybe some red flags that you guys can look out for, because unfortunately this market, as it has gotten really popular, has started to draw in a lot of people that want to fudge the numbers on what they're working with, or blatantly lie sometimes about what they actually have in their collections. All right, guys, so this is another male. You can see he's got a big fat belly. So again, you know, this is probably not the best time for me to be making this video, but it felt like it was time for me to go ahead and cover this stuff. So I'm going to do my best to support that part of his belly. But this was sold to me. Again, this is a male. He was sold to me as a pure Kalatoa. And unfortunately, I found out after the fact, and, you know, I paid decent money for this male. I actually bought a pair. I no longer have the female. But this male was sold to me as a pure Kalatoa. Unfortunately, the thing with dwarves and super dwarves is that with locality stuff, especially with the pures, you really need to be able to confirm the island that the animals came from, you know. So in other words, like, it needs to be on the paperwork when the animal was brought in. It needs to be documented. If you plan on, you know, especially breeding them as pures, you know, to preserve these bloodlines, you need to have that documentation that, hey, yeah, this really is a pure Kalatoa because it was brought in as a Kalatoa, which tells me that the guys that plucked it off the island, they were on Kalatoa Island. That's where it came from, and we can prove that from start to finish. In other words, straight from the source all the way until when it came into the United States, and then prove that it was never crossed out to something that was not Kalatoa blood. Unfortunately, with this guy, that is not the case. It was sold to me as pure Kalatoa. I took, I made a mistake and kind of trusted the breeder on what they were telling me that they had and what they were telling me they were selling me, and that was a huge mistake. I should have done my due diligence. It was a spur of the moment thing. What I should have done realistically was said, hey, great, I'm glad that you're telling me that it's a pure Kalatoa, but I should have done some more digging. I should have done some more research on where the animals came from, who the breeder was. I'm not going to get into who exactly it was that I purchased from, because I just don't see the need to spew any kind of drama out there into the hobby. But yeah, that's just an unfortunate thing that happens, and we're seeing it more and more often. If you jump on Morph Market right now, there's probably a bunch of high percentage super dwarves and things that are listed, or maybe even some pures. But I can tell you wholeheartedly that almost 100% of the time those animals are not going to be represented accurately. There's only a handful of breeders in the United States that I would personally trust, even as far as I could throw them, to get these animals from. Again, Garrett being one of those. Guys like Eric Lee have great animals. Who else? Andrew Acevedo, Aaron Metcalf. Those guys are super trustworthy, and I trust their knowledge and their transparency with their animals. But unfortunately, like I said, I kind of lost out on this one because this male now, unfortunately, isn't really going to do me too much good in terms of breeding, because I can't breed him back to pures, or anything like that, and I don't know his localities. So I do believe that he is a pure super dwarf based on his size. So this animal is almost 3 years old. And you see just how tiny he is. This is an almost 3-year-old reticulated python. And so that's amazing. And so, I mean, this is an amazing animal as far as in terms of a pet. But unfortunately, the purposes that I got him for was for breeding. And so now, I'm kind of stuck with just, again, I'm happy to keep him as a pet. He's an amazing animal. You can see just how docile he is. He's doing great, especially having a big belly right now, a big meal in him. But yeah, just something to keep an eye out for. So again, this is a pure super dwarf. I do believe he's at least 50% Kalatoa. The other side, I think, is an unknown locality. He is an F1. Both parents were wild caught. So again, I do believe that he is a pure super dwarf. And again, you can tell that just based on his size. And you can see I don't underfeed him. But yeah, just one of those things. So just a lesson learned. So moving on from him, let's jump into this big girl that you may or may not be able to see behind me in this cage. She actually just had a fresh shed. You may be able to see I haven't even pulled that shed out. She just shed overnight. So she's going to be camera ready. So let's take a look at her. All right, so I'm going to get her shed out and I'll show you that. I'm pretty excited. This is actually her first shed that she's had since I switched her into this enclosure, and I wasn't sure how she was going to do in here. But she had a big, really clean shed. So let's see if we can get this all out, kind of one piece. She's still got a little bit of it in there, but you guys can see she's not a small girl. Some of this blew out a little bit, but yeah, she's not little. Yeah, it looks like her eye caps are on there, so we're good there. Hey, big mama. Come here. Yeah. Alright guys, so with this last one, she is a bigger girl, and again, as with all these guys, I just fed them last night. With the bigger snake, I'm going to try not to handle her. I was going to try to get her out just for a minute, and she's just really not in the mood. Not that she's being, like, pissy or whatever. She's not trying to strike or anything like that, but she just absolutely really wants to stay in that cage. So rather than force her to come out and stress her out and risk, like, her either regurgitating or, like, just, pooping all over the room, I'm just going to leave her in there, and I will get you guys some as good a shots as I can of her in her enclosure. But I will give you the breakdown on what exactly she is. So she's a 50% Solaire, tiger, and she's 100% het for Rennet Ghost. You guys may have heard me talk about it before. I have the world's only pair of those genetics. Her brother is in this top cage. I'm not going to show him off today. Unfortunately, he's got a little bit of an infection that I'm fighting, which is why his cage is closed up, so I'm not going to stress him out by shoving a camera in his face. He has started eating again, which is good. There's all good signs, so I'm hoping that we're working towards getting that infection knocked out. He's got a second vet appointment coming up, and again, I'll have some videos coming up on all that stuff. But for right now, like I said, I'll cut some shots of her. Alright guys, so that's it. Like I said, I just really wanted to take a minute and highlight some animals that I feel like I have not done justice to in terms of talking to you guys enough about them. Nobody really seems to talk enough about dwarf and super dwarf pythons, reticulated pythons, and like I said, I feel like I've done them a disservice by not talking about them enough up until this point. So I was really excited to share those with you guys because, again, like realistically, even though my collection is mostly ball pythons, these guys are really where my passion lies, and these are the projects that I'm almost more excited about than even the stuff I'm doing with Ultramel. That'll probably surprise some of you guys, but I'm really excited about the future that the dwarf and super dwarf market kind of has going for it. We've really only just barely scratched the surface, you know, in terms of what can be done with them, and you know, just making these guys smaller and smaller, and just again making reticulated pythons something that anybody can keep. Like the idea of that is crazy, but it's on the way. You know, and they're going to just continue to get more and more affordable and more readily available. But it's up to us. The number one thing I drive home, it is up to us as buyers, as consumers, to make sure that we are voting with our dollar and only spending money on animals that we can verify with breeders that are doing things the right way and are documenting their animals properly. I cannot stress that enough. It is the first thing that I tell people when I see posts on, you know, Facebook groups, Positive Pythons, things like that, or people talking about rescuing dwarves and super dwarves, or, oh yeah, I'm going to get one from this guy, and it's somebody that no one's ever heard of. And that's not to discourage people from getting into it and trying to sell these animals, but these people didn't just pop up with these animals overnight. It takes minimum 5 years even to get a female ready to lay, ready to breed. And that's not even to say that she's going to go, but that's minimum 5 years. So these people that are just coming out of nowhere, all of a sudden they have all these animals, I would be very, very careful. Because the last thing that you want is to be sold an animal and told that it's going to stay under 10 feet and then you end up with a mainland. And that stuff happens every day. I see it all the time. So that's kind of my disclaimer on the dwarf and super dwarf stuff, is just please be a smart consumer. It is up to you. It is your responsibility to do that. It is your responsibility to look into something. If it sounds too good to be true, it absolutely is. Not probably is, it absolutely is. And when it comes to dwarfs and super dwarfs. So that's really it. Again, I didn't mean to get negative there at the end, but I don't think that it's been driven home enough. As much as Garrett has talked about it and many of us have talked about it, it is not driven home enough. It is up to us to make sure that we're spending money with the right people on the right animals. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that this was educational for some of you guys. If anybody's got questions about any of these animals, or if there's stuff that you want to see me do videos on in the future with regards to these guys, please let me know. I'd be happy to do all that. Again, I feel like this was a little bit short, but that was mostly because everybody got fed last night, so I didn't want to do too much to kind of, you know, agitate them. I wanted to get them back on heat so they could all digest and everybody be, you know, happy and healthy. So thank you guys again for tuning in. This has been Zach with Nava Reptiles. Everybody have a happy new year, and thank you guys again for tuning in. Love y'all, and we'll see y'all next week.